As you folks probably already know, if you're tuning in, they announced on Friday that this year's conference is going to be a virtual event. And so Pat's going to talk a little bit about that, what you can expect, what's going to be the same, what's not going to be the same. And we'll just kind of get into from there. Jeff, I'll let you start it off to bring Pat into the conversation.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. So Pat, to start off with, we've seen over the last couple of months, a lot of conferences have tried to reschedule later in the year. Some conferences have attempted, have just decided to cancel. And a few like yours are going to try and go the virtual route. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the process by which you decided to undertake a virtual conference and what that's going to entail.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite a process, I'll tell you, going through this. 8 weeks ago, I had no idea what this entailed. So I've learned a lot over the last 7 or 8 weeks. I think we got a little lucky on our timing in that we had our exhibitors about the third. It was about the third week in February. We knew who our exhibitors were going to be. We had placed them on the show floor. We had, I think, by that time notified them who was going to be in and whatnot. So that was a good thing. We kind of had that behind us. About the first week in March, we were working through the final details of placing all of our speakers, right? So we had reviewed all the abstracts. We went through a very long, rigorous abstract review process, and we were in pretty good shape. We still had a couple things to fix, but for the most part, had it been a normal year, with a normal conference, we were kind of ready to go, right? We had our plan in place. We knew all the steps we needed to take. And from then on, it was just kind of implementing the plan, right? So we were pretty sound. But things changed very drastically the week of the 9th of March. That's when we saw the stuff on the news and the basketball things started to get canceled. And it was just a tremendous change. And we quickly, realized that SmallSat was going to be impacted in some way. We didn't know what. We didn't know what we were going to do. We still had to lay our plans out in place, but we knew we were going to have an impact. So we actually started on the 16th of March. And there are two things we did in parallel that really benefited us. One thing we did is we put together 3 realistic scenarios of what we thought we might be able to do at the conference, okay? And then we wanted to understand the impacts of each of those scenarios on our staff, on our attendees, on our facilities, on the technologies that we would be using throughout the conference. So on our food and beverage, if we had anybody here, we still had to deal with food and beverage, and that was quite an impact. The other thing we did is we started to plan. We knew that by the middle of March, we were not going to be able to make a decision. We knew that. We knew we had to at some point in the future, but we didn't exactly know when that end date was gonna come. So we started to plan for 3 conferences essentially in parallel, right? You got the main kind of a traditional conference, somewhere between 3,000, 4,000 people. There were going to be a lot of things we were going to have to figure out there. We picked one that was like a less attendance, something like 500 people. And the third one we picked was a virtual conference. That's what we ended up going with. So we had the plans in place so that basically what we didn't want to do, guys, is we didn't want to get to the decision day and say, okay, we're picking virtual, and then say, oh my gosh, what do we have to do to plan for this conference now, right? So we had all the plans in place, and that was kind of that 5-6 weeks process that we sort of worked through. The second thing we did is we knew we needed help. We needed to bring in and rely on as many facts as we possibly could. So we reached out to experts. We were, of course, following the guidelines of the CDC and what was coming out of the state of Utah. Governor Gary Herbert was really good about providing sort of daily updates on how he wanted to see the state of Utah proceed. But we got really closely connected very quickly with our local health department here, the Bear River Health Department, and they were superb. They basically helped us to understand and digest some of the information that we were hearing from the state of Utah. They also helped us put together a preventative hygiene plan. We knew that if we were going to bring anybody here, we had to do it in a way that was safe and healthy for not only our attendees, but also our staff. And and other folks within the community. So that they were really helpful there. We also leaned really heavily on Utah State University. President Noel Cockett, the president of the university, had put together a COVID-19 task force, and we immediately connected with them to figure out, what were the limitations going to be? Were there size limitations? Were there facilities we could use or couldn't use? Those sorts of things. And we worked, we probably talked a couple times a week with those folks to sort through some of that.
Well, what were they telling you, Pat? If I could jump in, what were they telling you in terms of the advisability of doing a mass attended event in the August timeframe? Do they say, "Hey, forget it. This is not going to happen"?
No. Actually, they were pretty positive initially. They've got a lot. Look, they have a lot on their plate.
Yeah.
They are making massive decisions. All of our universities in the country and around the world they have huge decisions they have to make with how many students, whether they're going to bring them to campus, whether they're going to be housed on campus, whether they're going to be doing it all virtual. They were going through some pretty serious discussions, and we were just a kind of a subset of those discussions. We left everything on the table. We decided, both Utah State, us, Berger Health Department, we were going to leave everything on the table until we had all the information in place to make a decision. So worked out pretty well.
I follow you.
Meaning we didn't have to jump the gun. We were able to give ourselves a little bit of time to think about some of this stuff. We worked with event services on campus. Those are the folks who help us typically put the conference on each year. We worked with a campus stabilization committee, but because kind of what you're getting to is they were trying to figure out at Utah State, how would they handle a mass gathering? What were their limitations going to be and things like that? And then one really important group that we connected with was the distance education group at Utah State. I kind of feel lucky that we're associated with Utah State because they have such a great distance learning curriculum, right? They've got a bunch of technology on campus. They've got a bunch of expertise. They have been doing this for 25 plus years, and they are going to allow us to leverage a lot of their capability to put on this virtual conference. So that's one of the reasons why I think we've actually got a pretty good shot of putting something together that's good for the community. Okay.
Excellent. So let's get into that a little bit, but I'd like to take this opportunity to put up a polling question for the audience. Let's find out who's on with us today, whether it's folks who have been to SmallSat in the past or not. We'll just launch this poll right now. And the question is, prior to the pandemic, did you plan to go to SmallSat this year? I can tell you right now, I don't know if everybody's seeing this live. What's that?
I was planning on being there.
Yeah, I was too. It's not giving me the option to answer.
I can't answer.
Maybe. So right now, it's overwhelmingly 72% of the people in our audience right now have voted. Looks like they're still trickling in. I'll leave it open just so we get a final account. Are you seeing it on your screen right now?
Yeah, I am, but I can't vote.
Yeah, hosts and panelists can't vote.
Yeah, so that's the problem there.
So
we'll let it go a few more seconds and close it off because it's overwhelmingly 70 to 72%. We're saying that they had been planning to go.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll end that poll so we can get back.
Yeah, no problem. So
share the results with everybody.
Let me tell you another group that was really helpful for us is the website for SmallSat is actually hosted here at the Space Dynamics Laboratory. So we have a team that works on that throughout the year. It's really, really great. But they were really beneficial to us because once we started bringing up the concept of potentially having a virtual conference, they basically said, okay, here's what we could do. Here's the options we have before us. Here's the options which are not going to work at all. We're going to help you understand how our attendees can interact with the website. And then also how that website is going to work and tie in with Utah State, because Utah State's going to play a big role. They're going to store all of our pre-recorded videos that we're going to do, and they're also going to stream those things live, right? So that was really, really beneficial. But so all we did really was a pretty simple process. We just went through every single day. We understood the new impacts. We kept getting updates every day. We understood maybe what our plans were, and we started adjusting our plans. And then about the 1st of May, that's when it really sort of came to a head. So what's that, a week and a half ago, right? And that's when Governor Herbert released his new revised plan for moving forward. And the basics are, within this plan, he's got the stabilization phase. Stabilization phase runs from May 1st through about the end of September. And when we looked at it very closely with the Bear River Health Department. And it looks like the best case scenario we could come to was that we were only going to be able to have 50 people come on site to Logan, Utah. Well, that is obviously not very conducive to holding a large global conference here, right? Now, our goal is to get the community back together as soon as possible. But until we can do that in a way that is safe for the community and for our staff, we're going to do a virtual conference right now. I also realize that this is not a substitute for an in-person conference, right? There are so many networking opportunities and collaborative opportunities that you just get from being around. And you guys have been to SmallSat before. We lunch together. You know, we go to parties together. There are parties all over town, and there's a lot of work gets done at those things. There's a lot of that stuff that's not going to be able to happen, but we are going to do our absolute best to make sure we can try and help the community move forward in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think that's a good opportunity to ask how the conference is really going to be structured in this virtual format. And the announcement you talked about, you're still going to have the keynotes, you're still going to have the technical sessions and so on. How is that going to work for the attendee sitting at home in terms of what they're going to be able to see and when and how?
So I'm kind of glad you asked, because like I said earlier, I had put together some notes on this so I wouldn't forget, because it's a pretty long list. But we are still really excited about our keynote speaker, Chris Scalise. Dr. Chris Scalise, the director of the NRO, will be here. That's going to be fantastic. All the presentations that you typically see when you come to Logan for a conference, we're going to have all those, right? All the people who are on the main stage speaking in the sessions, those folks will all have their time on stage. We've got the Swifties. Those are those 3-minute kind of short talks that we put together a few years ago. NASA is going to host 2 short talk sessions. That's going to be great. We're going to have exhibits. So that'll be cool. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. We're still going to have the Frank J. Red student competition. So that's great. Matter of fact, I got to tell you this, we always get a lot of interest in the student competition, because gosh, you can win $10,000, you know, and a starving student, $10,000 is pretty good. But we've had an overwhelming amount of support this year. We have got more papers than we've had for a long time. So our judges are going to have to do a lot of reading and scoring over those papers, but that's going to be a great thing. Poster sessions, we'll have poster sessions. We'll have side meetings. As you know, we typically have about in the neighborhood of 30 different side meetings that we help put together for the community, and we're going to do those. I know it's not the perfect thing to do. It's not optimal, but hopefully those will help fill in for some of those. And then our media page. And thanks to SpaceNews, you guys have been great with this, but we're going to have a media page where any of our media sponsors can get on and get news as well as provide news, and that's great. And then you all are going to have your Space Show dailies. So we're super excited about that. That'll really keep the industry updated throughout the week. So thank you very much. Now, we realize that the number one thing from our feedback that we get, the number one reason why people come to SmallSat is networking opportunities, right? They want to collaborate. My guess is that you could pull any conference in the world, and that would probably be their same response, right? It's all about networking. And we want to do the best we can to provide networking opportunities. We think we can do this through webinars. We're taking a very serious look into webinars. We want to kind of have 3 separate categories. One is going to be a set of webinars that we hold every day that will be hosted by SmallSat, right? So from that, I'm talking about maybe webinars on a specific session, a specific topic, a specific technical topic, maybe a specific presentation. The other thing is that we're going to have webinars which will fill in for the side meetings. And the third is all of our exhibitors will have the opportunity to participate, of course, in as many webinars as they want, but they'll also be able to host their own webinar. So if there's information they want to get out to the general public and things they're doing and where they're heading, they'll be able to have their own webinars. Now, to talk a little bit more about the exhibits, the way we envision it is we're going to put together a page which is all about our exhibitors. They'll have all their logos and things from the different organizations. You can click on those. You can get points of contact. It provides corporate information or organizational information. We're hoping some of these folks will put together videos and we'll provide links to those videos. And then of course, they'll all be able to have their own webinars. So that's a pretty cool thing. But again, we realize it's not a drop-in replacement. We're not trying to simulate a conference in person, but until we can get the community back together again, we're going to do everything we possibly can to make it useful.
Sure. So what I'm picturing here is you have some sort of virtual homepage. You have some homepage for the conference, and there's a lot of links to exhibitor videos. If they decide that they're going to schedule a webinar during the week of August 1 through 6,
Yep.
The links to the webinar registration will be on the SmallSat page. You might push it out through your communications with registered attendees. Do I have kind of the right idea here?
You got it. You got it. We envisioned, matter of fact, yesterday we put together our first draft of what we thought it would look like. It still needs some work, but the basics are, we want to make sure that people actually have some time to listen to some of the presentations. Let's say we've got a session on propulsion. Okay.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that there's a block of time where people can go in and listen to some of those, maybe all of them, but listen to some of the propulsion talks, and then be able to participate in the post-session webinar with some of the speakers who were involved in that session, so that you could ask follow-up questions, or contact me and pass along information and things like that. So we're hoping that those will all happen just after they had time to view all the talks.
And you envision the question and answer taking place through a text chat function, or having?
No, we're going to moderate it. Well, I guess maybe you're right. Yeah, we're going to have a moderator. There'll be some sort of a chat function where the moderator can take some of the questions and pose them to the different people who participated in the session.
Sure, which is kind of what we're doing now. We have some questions coming in from the audience, and SmallSat was not always a trade show, but it has been in recent years. And in fact, you have 2 exhibit centers. You have the Student Center, and then you have the Field House. And as far as I know, you have a wait list for people who want booth space. So now that you're going virtual, will you be able to accommodate more exhibitors than you have in years past?
So this year, this may change. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but this may change. Right now, our exhibitor list are the people that we signed up in February.
Okay.
And the people that, got in on time and did all their work on time, that's going to be our exhibitor show.
Right. Okay, I follow you. So that's so if you're not already signed up as an exhibitor for SmallSat this year, you're not going to get into the virtual exhibit hall. I understand that.
You can go on the wait list if you want to get on the wait list. And maybe somebody drops out and says, "Hey, this is not worth our time." We'd be happy to put you on the wait list and consider moving you in if that happens.
Sure. Now, Pat, what was the thinking in terms of deciding to pre-record sessions as opposed to trying to do them in a live format?
Yeah, so again, it's not all pre-recorded. We'll have some of these live webinars, but really there were 2 primary reasons. And the first thing is that we thought about was anytime somebody gives a talk, any talk, this talk right here or somebody else, the whole point is they want to get their message across, right? They don't want to be concerned about the audio quality, the video quality, the lighting. Can the people in the back hear me? Can the people in the back see my slides? Are my slides going to advance on time? Are my embedded videos going to work, right? And we just thought number one, we're new at this, okay? So we're very new at this. I think our whole community is kind of new at this. I think we had the best opportunity to provide the highest quality audio and video possible. If we can work out some of the kinks, of which I don't know what they are, but I know we're going to have some, if we can work out those kinks before the conference actually happens. There's 2 things we really want to do. One, we want to give the presenter and the speaker the best opportunity to get their message across in as clear a way as possible. And number 2, we wanted to make sure that our attendees could have the easiest way to digest this information. When you get the funky screen and the blue screen of death and the audio's cutting out and people are dark, or you can't see the speaker's face because the lighting's not appropriate. we're going to help work with them when we do the recording to make sure that we make that the highest quality possible so that it's good for the conference.
Sure, I follow that.
Now, actually, I should say there's one other that I need to add, and that is our international conference, our international participation. We have a significant international participation. This year, I would have probably expected about 1,000 international participants from somewhere between 45 and 50 countries, right? And it just makes it really, really hard logistically. So we had laid out our technical sessions. And when you look in there, there might be somebody speaking from South Africa, followed by somebody speaking from Michigan, followed by somebody speaking from Japan. It was a big mishmash. And we really had a hard time trying to figure out how to schedule these things, right?
Sure.
If we try to hold the conference for the most part during the daytime in the United States, that makes it extremely difficult for our international participants to have to, get up and be ready to give a presentation at 2 a.m. So
Yeah.
we want the opportunity for them to participate in the best way they possibly can. Now, we realize this doesn't solve all of our problems because of the live webinars, but we're hoping that they can digest a significant amount of the information we're providing recorded, and then pick and choose the webinars that they want to hop onto and get involved with. And if maybe it's a little bit late at night where they're at, or maybe it's early in the morning, but I think that'll help our participants all around the globe.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the webinars you're talking about, I know some people are wondering if there's going to be opportunities to bring in perhaps some late-breaking topics or discussion about the effect the pandemic has had on the SmallSat industry. Are there going to be some opportunities there to go beyond what you may have originally planned in terms of conference program? Absolutely.
Those things are all up in the air right now. We have kind of laid out the simplistic form, we're going to have these kind of webinars, and sort of a more structured approach. But there's nothing that says that we can't have a couple of open spots each day that are late breaking things. I think that's a great idea. I'd like to actually consider moving that forward. That might be a great option for us.
Yeah. And we're going to be doing some of that ourselves as we continue to do right now. And we see opportunity to do that during SmallSat to kind of plug in during the day. Traditionally, we have pushed out a newsletter at the end of each day at the conference. And then we have a print show daily that it arrives at the venue in the morning, recapping the previous day's news. This being kind of an asynchronous conference where all the content's going to come out Netflix binge style each day. There's an opportunity here for SpaceNews to kind of pre-digest some of that, get out some news stories, help keep our audience informed of what the day's best bets are, what's coming up in terms of the live events. So it's as far as SpaceNews is concerned, August 1 through 6 is still SmallSat week. I think it's going to be unavoidable when you go to spacenews.com, or if you follow us on social media, you're going to see a lot of SmallSat news. Traditionally, early August is when a lot of companies, whether they're SmallSat manufacturers, operators, launch providers, they like to tee up announcements for the conference. They'll have announcements either on the exhibit hall floor, or they will put out press releases. So I guess I want to get the word out to anybody in the audience with us today who's on that side of the business of making the news. We want your news. We're gonna get it out there that week. We're gonna make it. Instead of being Shark Week, it's going to be SmallSat Week.
Thank you very much for doing that. That's great. By the way, let me just go back and touch on a topic with the pre-recorded. The other thing we're planning on doing is releasing all the information sort of at once, sort of do a one drop a day.
Yeah.
That is to support the international community as well. The smaller chunks that you put it into, let's say we did a 2-hour drop and a 2-hour drop and a 2-hour drop, that sort of starts to simulate a live conference. So we're still trying to figure out when we're going to drop all that data, whether it's earlier in the morning or very late at night. But we want our international participants to have the chance to digest some of that information and then hop on a webinar and say, hey, I learned something 8 hours ago. Tell me about this, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, we're definitely looking forward to being a part of this as well. I do want to put up another poll question, and it's a kind of a good lead in to any advice you might have for anybody in the audience who is either planning their own conference a little further out than August, or they're planning to attend a conference as an exhibitor possibly. So some of the thinking that you've gone through and any lessons learned. But let's throw up a poll here real fast. It's about when folks will be heading back to conferences. So let's just keep that up there for about 30 seconds. Can everybody see it? Oh, yeah. So Jeff's shaking his head, so I assume.
Yeah.
Pat, you can talk about it since we are coming up. We wanted to not keep everybody too long today, but what lessons do you have that you can impart to folks who are trying to plan, commit resources to conferences that are supposed to start back up again late summer, early fall?
Yeah, so we're 6 weeks into we've got about 8 weeks left, or 8.5 weeks left to do the planning. So I suspect that we'll learn a lot more things over the next 8 weeks, and then probably by the time the conference is over, there'll be some things that went really well, and there'll be some things that didn't go really well, right? So we'll probably have a few stages of being able to provide lessons learned. But I can tell you there's a couple things that we did that were super beneficial to me and to the rest of our staff, right? One is we put together those scenarios that I talked about, right? And here's how that helped us out. It got our staff thinking about, okay, if we do this, how's that going to impact our staff? If we do this, how's that going to impact our facilities and our attendees and all those sorts of things? The next thing that came out of that was then, let's put together a plan, right? We basically planned 3 conferences in parallel, so that when we get to the point and the decision is made, no matter whether somebody makes the decision for us or we make our own decision, we turn the switch, we have as much time as possible to actually implement the plan, right? So that was a really good thing that we did. And I think it got us all on the communications page, talking to one another. That was really, really helpful. The other thing we did was we reached out. I mean, we just took the approach that we need help to make this decision. We did not make this decision on our own. We worked very closely with our local health department. We worked very closely with Utah State and the Space Dynamics Laboratory. And every single day, something changed. Every single day, something changed that we would put into our impacts, we would put into our plans, made little bitty changes. And by the time the decision was made, we had everything ready to go. That was a very, very good thing. We didn't just wait, until the end and say, okay, now let's figure out what in the heck we're going to do going forward. I would say those are probably to date. And again, I've got more things I know we're going to learn over the next couple months here. But I think to date, those are probably the 2 biggies. I think if there was one thing that I probably made a mistake on, that I would have done differently if I'd have gone back 6 weeks, I would have updated our website more frequently. We put out, I don't even know when it was, a month ago or so, we put out a statement, said, SmallSat's working, we're planning, bear with us, that kind of a thing. What I hadn't thought about is our international community, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're in South Africa, if you're in Australia or Japan, and you're an exhibitor, and you need to send your booth material to the middle of Logan, Utah, out here in the middle of the boonies, right? Those people are sending their booths 2 months in advance, right? So they were starting to box things up, and how are we they're printing materials, they're getting everything ready. And they started calling us and sending us emails and saying, hey, should we be sending our stuff? Because if you're gonna have a conference, we'll send it. But if you're not gonna have a conference, we're going to send all this stuff over there, and then you're going to say, no, you better bring it home. And they're going to spend a lot of money to get it home.
Yeah.
So it probably would have been better for us to update the website more frequently. And I think we've because of that, I've kind of shifted. The pendulum has swung a little bit, where I was probably a little bit too lax on providing information on our website. And now we're providing everything on our website. You saw the information we sent out on Friday. We made it as detailed as we possibly could. Our exhibit manager is in contact with our exhibitors. We're in contact with our speakers. we're trying to do everything we can now to make sure the public is well informed. That's probably the one thing where I think I probably could have done a better job. But looking back, we only had 6 weeks. So
yeah. So you're saying you're advising folks to kind of go beyond kind of a standard statement that we're keeping dibs on the COVID-19 situation,
or even things like, hey, we're working through this.
Mm-hmm.
We realize that it's coming up time that you need to send your booths. Please call us before you mail that.
I follow you.
Something like that. That would have been a good thing,
Just
right?
acknowledging that contingency planning is going on, because I mean, it only makes sense now, right? That it has to happen. I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions. We'll just go a couple minutes longer if you've got the time.
Yeah.
What did an attendee badge cost last year?
It depends on when they sign up, but it's like $600 or something.
So between that and this year, you decided to not charge attendees to participate in the conference. Is that the price point for a virtual conference?
No. It costs money.
Yeah.
Look. Here's basically what happened. We knew as a committee. We met with the committee several times throughout this process. We knew as a committee we had to put something on for the community. Right. There's so much momentum right now. We all grew up in this community. The SmallSat conference exists for one reason, and it's for the small satellite community, right? There's no other reason we exist. So we decided, there's never really a question if we're going to move forward to do something. I think the biggest question was what it's going to look like, right? Mm-hmm. But there were 2 drivers that led us to that decision. One was the way we run the conference. We're very lucky here, but we run it very, very lean. We have a very small staff that works throughout the year to put the conference on. And even during downtimes, we have, times when we're not running 100 miles an hour. That's in the sort of after conference, September, October, November. So our staff back off to like 75 or 80%. So that saves us a little money. And then a really big portion of us being lean is the support that we get from Utah State University and the Space Dynamics Lab. You guys have been to the conference before. When you go up there, there's red shirts everywhere, right? They got the SmallSat red polos on, they got the logos on. Most of those people, with the exception of 3 or 4, have only been working for the conference for a week. We basically use them for surge capacity. We bring them in, we give them a couple days training, we ask them to help us. And when the conference is over, they go back to their normal day jobs. So that's been really, really beneficial to us. The second thing is, and this is really the kind of the big reason, is we were able to put together a reserve fund. If you go back to 9/11, I mean, it was that long ago. It was 19 years ago. That was really an eye-opening event for us, right? Because the question came up, what would have happened had a 9/11 event or some catastrophic event that was beyond our control? What would have happened if that took place a week before SmallSat?
Yeah.
Or a day before SmallSat, right? So we've spent all this money getting ready for a conference. Nobody shows up, so we don't bring in any revenue, right? We don't have any money left over. How can we make sure that we are there for the community the following year? So that's when we made it a very key theme of ours, and our key theme was going to be financial stability. We decided we were going to do everything possible so that when something happened, it might not be 9/11, it could have been any other sort of thing. This year it happens to be COVID-19, that we were going to be able to endure through one catastrophic event and make it to the following year so that we were there for the community, okay? So fast forward to this year. One of the things we did when we went through all of our scenarios and did our analysis in our scenarios was cost. We tried to understand every detail we possibly could about the cost of putting on these conferences. Once we chose virtual, we looked at the cost of putting on a virtual conference. We looked at our reserve fund. We had enough money in our reserve fund to cover this year's conference, which is, by the way, much, much less expensive than putting on an in-person conference. And we had enough money to get our staff to the following year. So our committee, we had a committee meeting. They said, look, we need to do 2 things. One, we need to put the conference on for the community in some way. We know it might not be optimal, but 2, we need to do it as low as cost as possible so that we can support maybe some of these smaller companies who have fallen on hard times. Yeah. And to us, as low a cost as possible based on how much we had in our reserve fund was no cost. So that's what we're going to do. the community has supported this conference, and we've grown up together for 34 years. And this is our opportunity to give something back.
Thanks very much. I imagine that I hope more conference organizers are in a similar situation where they can weather an economic disruption from a canceled or rescheduled conference plan. I have no idea how widespread that is. And if I could put up a live poll right now, I would ask the audience. Before we sign off, I do want to put these results back up and see if anything jumps out to you, Jeff or Pat, from what our audience had to say today. Anything jump out at you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think we've got a fair number of optimists here about going back in the fall. We'll have to, this is a rapidly evolving situation that we're in right now. And, we're seeing conferences that were planned for the fall, for October, November, being rescheduled, postponed, or just not being held at all. So we'll have to wait and see if, we really can get back, particularly for a large conference, a SmallSat scale of conference of thousands of people. Maybe a small workshop might be more feasible in the fall, but we'll see. This is changing pretty rapidly, and maybe it will change rapidly for the better.
Yeah. And Pat, did you look at rescheduling, and you looked at students coming back on campus, and it's hard to have SmallSat when.
Well, yeah, so that's, other than the virtual conference, we probably could have scheduled the virtual conference, but that really is a problem for us because we're tied into a schedule date based on the university schedule, right? So you got students coming back on campus, which means there's a lot of facilities which are unavailable to us.
Right.
They have lots of things leading up that the president has, and all the different deans and whatnot, they have their meetings. So there's a very limited window, which is why, by the way, we have worked with Utah State. We have got time scheduled for the conference for 5 years in advance. So we just had to do that. Now, once you go to the virtual conference, that would have given us some options. But we just said, we can do it just as well the first week in August as we could the first week in October. So let's choose August.
Yeah, and I think once you assume that, so you either assume students are back on campus, it's tough to schedule around them. And if you assume students aren't back on campus because of restrictions, then that pretty much answers the question about whether you can have a large gathering.
Sorry to jump in, but by the way, that was actually another thing that helped us make our decision was when we were working with the folks at Utah State about the distance education. Utah State is going through a massive discussion right now about if they're going to have virtual, non-virtual, half virtual, whatever they're going to do. And a lot of the people that were going to be able to help us and support us during the conference will probably be tied up with Utah State's traditional role.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to gain access to them when we can gain access to them. And that happens to be before school goes back in.
Yeah. So I don't want to put anything more on your plate, but there were quite a few questions here, maybe about 20 that we didn't get to answer on air. But once this is over, I'll just download them. I'll send them to you and to Eric. If you guys can look through them, if there's something you want to add as an FAQ to your website, you're welcome to do that. But that's a good way, I think, to keep in touch with everybody. If I was able to answer any of them, I'd be happy to do so. So I'll take a look at those. Before we leave everybody, I just want to remind you again that, we're living in unprecedented times. We're all trying to figure out a way to keep business as usual going forward in a very unusual environment. And all I can say is, as far as SpaceNews is concerned, we feel blessed that we cover an industry that is essential and that launches are still going forward. Programs of record are not being canceled. This industry has been insulated quite a bit from some of the economic repercussions of COVID-19. In the interest of normalcy, we're still very much looking forward to that first week of August to being a SmallSat week, and we're gonna put out a lot of content that week that's SmallSat related. If you happen to work for a company that's in the SmallSat business, keep in touch with your contacts at SpaceNews so you can let us know about news you have, because we want to help get it out there. And then we got to figure out something to do about Aggie's ice cream. It'd be nice if everybody watching will get a pint. I know that's one of the things I look forward to, but ice cream, I understand, is in short supply. So one of the many things that has been disrupted. Maybe
We'll
that's an
have-
opportunity for one of your for a would-be exhibitor to
Yeah,
FedEx everybody ice cream.
we will have plenty of ice cream when you all return.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Pat. Well, thanks very much, and to everybody who joined us today, we really appreciate it. And you'll be hearing more from us in the not too distant future. Everybody, stay well, wear a mask, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.